It is now time for what has brought us here today, to present the Barcelona Hypatia European Science Prize to this year's winner. As we heard before, the aim of the award is to give a recognition to the career of a person who has excelled in the field of science and research at the highest international level, influencing various fields of knowledge and having a positive impact on the well-being of humanity. I now invite Dr. Subirats and Dr. Capua to please come forward for the presentation of the Hypatia Prize. If you would kindly come to the front. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I now give the floor to Dr. Ilaria Capua, virologist and full professor and director of the One Health Center of Excellence at the University of Florida, who will deliver her presentation entitled Circular Health, a New Model for the Future. Dr. Capua, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. And yes, like they're thinking, why is she wearing a mask? And there's a reason why I'm wearing a mask. Because I am now going to take the mask off. And this might tangle completely in the microphone. But the reason that I'm doing this is because I am vaccinated. And I am here to advocate. I'll leave this here. What do you think? Everything might fall. So I'm here to advocate for the importance of vaccination. Vaccination is what is going to get us out of this pandemic. And therefore, it is essential that each one of us, he wasn't prepared for this, that each one of us does his and her own part to get rid of this terrible virus, which has turned our world upside down. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. There are a couple of other things that I wanted to say, and I just wanted you to be aware that this room has been a very important room for Barcelona. And actually, there was lots of important things happening for 500 years. And there's been lots of pandemics in those years. And this room has survived. It has survived, and it has survived to bring us today here to celebrate a woman, which is not me, which is Hypatia, because the prize is in the name of Hypatia. And so here's the second part of what I wanted to say as a surprise, is that I would like to dedicate this award to all the silent women that have made this pandemic less disastrous than what it could have been, all the women who have taken care of other people, all the women who have taken enormous burden, in additional burden, but also all the women who have worked behind the scenes in laboratories in trying to get the diagnostics and everything that needed to be done in this dramatic emergency. So my thanks go to them, and they go to also the women who did not make it to become a recognized scientist. You don't always make it. And those women that have contributed and have given something to science during their life and then haven't made it, have also made a contribution to science, which is important because they continue to perpetuate the importance of science by talking about science, by teaching science, by engaging their children with science. And so a prize like this Hypatia Prize must and can only be dedicated it's the first edition that sees a woman as an awardee to all those hidden women who have been, I would say, essential to get us where we are now. So I'm going to talk to you about, look at all these spirals that there are. This is a room that is full of circles. I'm going to talk to you about circular health. Circular health is a bit of fresh air after the pandemic. Am I in the wrong place? Am I in the wrong place, or am I okay with the cameras? I'm okay, good. No, because I see that people were moving, so I'm in the right place. Okay, so circular health is a breath of fresh air, is something new, is a new way to look at health, because I think that it's clear that we need to put health at the center, right? Because if we're not healthy, we're not doing anything. We're not good, we're not producing, we can't live our lives if we are not healthy. And there's a lot of circularity in Barcelona. And yesterday with Mia, we visited Casa Patró, and here are some of the pictures that I took. So let me start with a fun fact. This mathematician in the United Kingdom did this calculation to try and figure out all the viruses that that are infecting people at one moment in time, how much space they would occupy. And the answer is, they would all fit inside a can, all of them. So this gives you an idea of the immense power of pathogens. Everything that is being caused in this moment because of this virus, all of that can fit inside a can. And they are extremely powerful agents of change. They have changed many, many things over the years. And you know what? I was mentioning this room that has been around through certainly several waves of bubonic plague. And you know what? Pandemics are transformational events. They change society. If there's any historian here, you will know what the bubonic plague has done in pointing history in a different direction. And what we need to understand, though, of these events is that they are transformational events. Generally, if human beings don't get in their way, they are transformational events. So there will be a before and an after, okay? So, like here's the pandemic, there will be a before, and there will be an after. So that the pandemic is behind us, and we cannot go back to doing things the way we were doing before the pandemic, because we have learned that certain things were not exactly optimized. Also, pandemics shake systems, and some systems are going to collapse. And those collapsed systems need to be not salvaged or restyled, they just need to be developed into other systems. And we have to, learn and move on. This is what we have done over centuries and centuries. If you look at this slide, you will see the history of pandemics, of certain pandemics, and you will see that the Black Death had a reservoir in animals. You will see that Spanish influenza had a reservoir in animals, and also HIV has a reservoir in animals, because you know what? If you look at the big picture, like the big picture, we are just animals. We go in the box with animals, right? We don't go in the box with rocks or with plants. So if you look at how at evolution and you look at how we have this shared environment with other animals, that's why we get diseases from animals, okay? And one of these diseases, which was actually, it was Black Plague, but this plague of Justinian was killing 10,000 people in Constantinople every day. 10,000 people. Can you imagine having a disease that was killing 10,000 people a day? In Italy, we have had peaks of 600, 700 a day in the whole country. This is in one city, okay? So this is what diseases can do. And look at where and how it spread. This extremely devastating disease is spread around the Mediterranean. You know how? On boats. You know why? Because boats carry people, but what do they also carry? They carry rats, and rats carry fleas, and fleas carry bubonic plague. So you will not believe this. But this story starts from a bat, certainly from a bat virus. And I don't know if anyone in this room has noticed that attached to the lamps, there are bats. I have seen some bats attached, but they're artifacts. They are ornamental bats in here. So bats have been with us for a long time. Bats have been here for centuries and centuries. They've been living with us, and bats are ugly. They're actually very fascinating animals, but are quite dangerous because they carry a variety of viruses that can infect people. And we know, and like rabies is one of them. Okay, we don't need to look at new stuff. There's old stuff as well. So what happened to this bat virus? This bat virus encountered most likely a virus from a pangolin. Pangolins are among the most poached animals in the world because they are poached for their scales, and their scales are used in traditional medicine. And in 2019, they seized 10 tons of pangolin scales. 10 tons. I mean, pangolin scales, so pangolins are like this big, okay? Scales are scales. Potato chips. 10 tons. Can you imagine what a extermination of pangolins? And actually, there was a pangolin day before the pandemic. There is a day to preserve the pangolin. Because we shouldn't be doing these things. We shouldn't. And in any case, we shouldn't be putting these animals together in these horrible places that are known as live animal markets that have cats and dogs and monkeys. And you know what? Animals, Dr. Ferrero knows, animals, you cannot keep dogs and rabbits next to each other because one is a predator and one is a prey. And you know what? There's a lot of cortisone going on. There's a lot of fear going on. And viruses thrive where there is fear. So this shouldn't be happening. And there's another animal in there. The other animal is wearing a t-shirt and is manipulating the other animals. And that animal is called Homo sapiens, and that virus doesn't care whether that animal has fur or not. It's just another organism behind the receptor. But this happened in 2020. It did not happen 100 years ago. Because if it happened 100 years ago, which it probably happened maybe several times, this is what Wuhan looked like 100 years ago. There were camels. So for a disease to move on a camel back, it's like a completely different story. And probably you see these houses here, they were animal markets. They've been doing this forever. But instead, what happened is that it happened in 2020, in 2019, and that's what the world looks like, and that's what modern camels can do. They can take any pathogen and fly it to the other side of the planet in no time. So remember, viruses behave like viruses. It's human beings that make pandemics, not viruses. Viruses would have stayed wherever they were had it been for them. And so what happened was that this virus from these bats that you will see, they spread all over the world and very, very fast, but it baffled many people and many scientists and many decision makers, because was it the same everywhere? And the answer is no, because you know what? The virus behaves as a virus, but the problem is the host, is not the virus. And so why is it such a dramatic emergency in Europe with the aging population we have? Because in other parts of the world, they don't have an aging population, and so there's nobody over 40 who's around and who can be susceptible to infection. So what is COVID-19 really? And this was what brings me to circular health. It is a multi-system stress test, right? And it causes a series of effects which are very diverse. It can be highly lethal, it can be highly contagious, it can be non-symptomatic, it can cause long COVID, it can do all sorts of things under certain circumstances. And so basically, it is an extremely complex system that revolves around understanding the dynamics of this pandemic. So let's look at just a few things, of the little things that this little ball of jelly has caused, okay? Already 1 month after the lockdown, air was cleaner in China. 1 month after the lockdown, air is cleaner everywhere. It hasn't had an effect on pollution. More or less, it's come back, yes, no, so what? It has had an effect on pollution. It has an effect on air traffic, on international transportation, on international travel. I interrogate myself. I have spent a lot of time on airplanes, a lot of time. I met my husband in an airport, so, you know, that means that I was flying a lot. Now, would I go back to flying that much? Is there a real need to move around as much as we did then? Can we find an in-between that maximizes our carbon footprint and what we need to do and how we need to deliver this? But there's more. Some cities have been, I would say, raped by this disease. Some cities in northern Italy have been raped. They lost their people. They lost a lot of elderly people. They lost their residents because they left. They overloaded their healthcare system, and it was really hard. It's really hard. And these cities need to find a way to become resilient. They need to understand that the way things were working when it was before the pandemic, we cannot do that anymore because it's just not going to work like that. And other cities in Europe have been crippled by this disease. But not only, we have had to change our way of worshiping and of being spiritual. We can't go to church, we can't worship, we can't be with our friends anymore. I mean, this is something that has enormous ramifications. We have, of course, learned about His Highness the pangolin, which has become a creature of great mystery, but we have certainly started thinking about how we should be more respectful of biodiversity. Certainly we have this little ball of jelly has caused the greatest economic crisis ever, and billions are being spent to recover and to be resilient. I don't want to use this word too much, but recover and resilient, we have to look forwards and not look backwards. I will also later on talk about this, which is something which has been, we've been talking about it for a while, our gender issues, and I really want to make a strong point about why this is so important and what we can do now for a more gender equal society. So the pandemic is like a big fat cloud that is in the sky, and it has rained and there has been lightning and thunder, and we have all been scared by the thunder. But one of my favorite mottos is every cloud has a silver lining, and I think that this cloud has much more. It has a rainbow inside it. And the rainbow it has, and in Florida you see these rainbows. They're like little rainbows sitting in the sky. They're not even round. And these, the rainbow that we have is so obvious that I don't even think that I need to explain it to you. The rainbow that we have is that we have finally realized that we are part of a system and that we must be respectful of that system and that we must work towards making that system sustainable and that we are not the invaders of that system that will destroy that system and that will profit and that will be non-respectful of the resources. Because what we can do, now that we understand that we are interconnected to the bats that are flying in the sky of Barcelona and of other places of the world, we can actually start imagining that we should co-advance health as a system and not only advance this for one category, but then you do something wrong in another category because things eventually don't add up. And there's another great revolution that we are experiencing that we cannot ignore. And this is the open science revolution, because all of our disciplines are becoming transparent, because they are becoming open, and we can see what's inside them. And if we can see what's inside them, and they're like made of glass, then what we can do is we can think about them in a different way, and we can rearrange them and use their power into shaping a circle. And at the center of that circle, that is where circular health lies. It lies where there is a convergence of disciplines that understand that health needs to be absolutely central. Okay, so this makes sense, right? I think that I've convinced each one of you. I'm sure that my daughter is even more convinced after she's heard this about 150 times. But I think I've convinced you. And you will say, okay, right, so how do we do it? How do we do it? Well, I don't know how we can do it, but I have 3 ideas that I would like to run past you and use this very special occasion to launch these calls, like the call in the wild. So 3 ideas, okay, for the future. One is about the past. Okay, my friends, before the pandemic, antimicrobial resistance was the biggest threat for human health that was deemed to exist. This is a graph which I took from WHO. It shows that the anticipated number of people dying of, you understand what I'm talking about, superbacteria, you understand, multi-resistant. They are bacteria that are selected in hospitals and are also selected for a series of other reasons, and that become totally resistant to other drugs. And antimicrobial resistance was considered to be a greater cause of death than cancer and cardiovascular diseases put together in 2014, okay? So, COVID has influenced this because we have been using a lot of antibiotics because of COVID. Maybe in some places we've been so good that we didn't use a lot of antibiotics, but certainly the situation was really bad before COVID. We need to know where we are now, and we need to know how COVID has impacted this. And so what do we need to do? We need to join the dots, because antimicrobial resistance is caused by overuse, it's caused by people throwing unused drugs in the toilet or in the ordinary rubbish. It is linked to use in animals. It is linked to use in agriculture. It is linked to a series of different drivers. So what do we need to do? We need to put the pieces together, and we need to understand exactly where we are with reference to the different sectors, the different countries, and the different disciplines that are revolving around this issue of antimicrobial resistance. So that's thing number one. We can't pretend that antimicrobial resistance is gone. It's not. And it is still alive and kicking and creating a lot of problems. Okay, my point number two for the future. We have seen that vaccines are magic, basically. Like, we have seen that vaccination has been able to stop a pandemic that was raging. And as soon as a certain number of, especially the most fragile individuals, were immunized, mortality dropped like this. Hospitalizations dropped like this. So vaccines work. New generation vaccines work, okay? This is something that I think is clear to all. However, only the rich have been vaccinated. And this is something that cannot be our future. This is something that we're going to have to work on. We have to work on equity, okay? So, but how do we work on equity? Well, do you know that in 2021, we still make vaccines with technology that is rather similar to what Pasteur was using? We have fermenters, reactors, chemistry, bacteriology, expression systems, viruses that grow, but we are basically using biological systems. And biological systems need to be stored in refrigerators. And so basically, we are using, so this is for COVID. Now we have the attention on COVID, but this is not only for COVID. This is for all vaccines. All vaccines that are currently on the market require the cold chain. But does it make sense that if we want to, do you think we can immunize the whole world if we attach this goal to having freezers? It's not only the places where you don't get electricity, it's also the places where you don't have constant electricity. And so we need to start thinking out of the box. And what do we need to think of? We need to think of ways where you see these people, they don't carry their vaccine like this or like this. You see, there's another box. How well do you think that product has been stored? And so what do we need to do? We need to unleash the potential of vaccination, which is investing in making thermostable vaccines. Vaccines that do not require the cold chain. Vaccines that can be put in a box and posted by the manufacturer to the other side of the world. How can we do it? We can do it by working on what we have, but we can do it by bringing in new technology, like 3D printing, like nanocarriers, like graphene technology. We can do it. We just need to prioritize this because it would have some immense benefits. We could use this technology for all vaccines of humans that we have. We could start using it for vaccines of animals. We could be looking at eradicating diseases that are crippling economies because we cannot keep them under control. And so we could use COVID as a way to project us into a future in which we would reduce the number of vaccine-preventable diseases and reduce the burden on women, because it is women that carry the greatest burden of prevention and of medication in the family. By the way, it would not only advance the health of humans and animals, it would also have a much lower carbon footprint, because I assure you that freezers and gases that are used to reach these temperatures are carbon intense. And this brings me to now. What can we do now? These are things that we need to work on. They're things that we need to think about. But there's something that we can do now. The pandemic has affected men and women because this is what viruses do. But a lot of what happens depends on the host. And we have seen that there are biomedical differences between men and women, but there are not only biomedical differences. There are differences which relate, for example, to the medical costs. There are differences which relate to how women comply with certain regulations and how they are more careful about hygiene and preventive measures. Women have also been the category that has lost the greatest number of jobs. In Italy, 90% of the jobs that were lost, women lost them. And so I think that the pandemic has really a multi-dimensional significance that we cannot ignore anymore. And so what can we do now? We can ask for, we can do something that's actually really easy. Easy. Because we are part of the scientific community, we are part of the public administration, we are part of academia. This is like really easy. We can request by default that whatever data that is studied for population studies in the post-pandemic environment is disaggregated by sex and gender. So why do we have to look at data that is not disaggregated? Why do we have to pay to have the data divided by sex and gender so that we have males and females? Why is this? This is not a luxury. This is something that if all the governors of the world, they tell us we want to help women, we want to empower women, we need to do something for women, but if we don't get the data that relates to women, and not only to the biomedical part, but to how women have been more resilient or how women have been more affected by this pandemic, we will never be able to help women, and we will never be able to unleash the power and the talent that is in our young generation of women. All of your daughters. We need to unleash that power. To unleash that power, we need to understand. And this is something that we could ask, and I am trying to push it through the G20, which is now happening in Italy with a group of women, I would say statisticians actually. And this is something that we can do. We as scientists, we can refuse to work on data that is not disaggregated by sex. We can find a way to make this happen, because this is something, the fact that we don't have access by default to this type of data is really something that we want to leave in the pre-pandemic environment. And with this, I would like to tell you that I really believe that this is the time that we can use all the information that we are generating with our devices from the public administration, from external observers like satellites. We can really use this data. We don't have to hide between the fact that it's not perfect, it's not clean, it's not interoperable. Yes, it's true, we know, but we need to move on. We are experiencing the most measured event in history, and we should really make the best of what we have with our talent, with our knowledge, with our computational capacity, and with the strength of interdisciplinarity, which I think will be the fuel of the future. Thank you very much.